All right, so I'm Jason Davis and from the Materials Lab, and want to talk a little bit about some quality assurance. Not as much fun as payrolls, I know, but what is quality assurance? Why we need it? Get into a little bit of the sampling and testing, and then at the end of a project, you're going to have your audit of testing and materials, how you wrap everything up. So, what is quality assurance? At its simplest, it is a system for ensuring the desired level of quality required by the Code of Federal Regulations. The FHWA requires all of this, and it's all of those planned and systematic actions necessary to provide confidence that a product or service will satisfy given requirements for quality. So what is that telling us? It's basically just a sample, fancy way of saying we want to get what we pay for. So we make references to sampling and testing. This thing always does this. It is not just sampling and testing, but this is an entire program. It's a cycle here. Your personnel, are they qualified? Do they know, have they been trained? Is that training documented? Do they have what they need to take proper samples and run these tests? Is your equipment in good working order? Has it been calibrated? Do the people know how to run the equipment? And is all that documented? And then finally, the eyes on the road at the end. A passing test does not substitute for a failing inspection. So the inspection is just as important as any of the testing that you're going to run. So we have a lot of references to QA. We'll start with the Louisiana standard specs. I always make reference to section 106, which is control of materials. Gives you kind of a 30,000 foot overview of who is responsible for sampling, who's responsible for the materials, what certificates are required on certain parts of the job. The materials sampling manual, which is going to help you generate your sampling plan. This is divided up by contract item and gives you frequencies, the requirements of how much you sample, when you sample, and any remarks in there. Again, this will help you generate a sampling plan specific for your project, which is going to be based on the bid estimates in your contract. We make a lot of references to AASHTO specifications, ASTM specifications, which are all national. We have some of our own procedures that are detailed in the testing procedures manual, or if we make modifications to some of these national tests, then we may write our own TR, we call them, which I found out means testing and reporting. That was a fun question to get into. But we will make a TR for those modifications or our own test procedures. The approved materials list is a list of sources that are pre-qualified. It's not blanket approval. We'll still have to use the sampling manual to test them at the proper frequencies. But it shows that these are a number of companies that are capable of producing materials meeting our specifications, but again, not blanket approval. And then at the end of the project, the audit of testing and materials, which is EDSM 3512. This used to be called the 2059. If anybody's worked on those before, we just changed it to audit of testing and materials. And these are all tied together by the contract. And I will mention it a number of times. And as Mary said, read your contract. The contract will have specification changes. And it actually says it right here, the standard specifications together with any supplemental and special provisions. And sometimes we will make changes here in just a proposal of a schedule of items here. We have a reference to side drain pipe, and that makes reference to double wall polyethylene pipe. So if we look in the contract, we have a special provision that says for culverts and storm drains, that 701 item, use of polyethylene pipe, polypropylene pipe is an acceptable substitute. And then we have the material specification 1006, which has been modified to include the polypropylene pipe reference to AASHTO M330. And in some cases, there's a lot of changes. We may have a complete revision of the specification. The Purple Book, Part 5, is no longer valid. There was a specification change in August of 2018 that completely replaced Section 5. So if you have anything asphalt, don't go by the Purple Book.
It is the shellback's turn. What do you think? False? Okay. Click it. False, correct.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Is this recording loud enough? I can't hear anything, but.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
Keep going. You're good.
So all of our contracts have the Buy America iron and steel provisions, including coatings. And this, of course, leads into the more fun Buy America, Build America. That's changing a number of things. This covers steel and iron still, but it also covers construction materials and manufactured products. And depending on what category these materials are in, manufactured products, I think, have to be 55% of the cost manufactured in the United States, and construction products are 100% manufactured. I can't remember either. There's a whole bill and law on that, and it explains it clear as mud. FHWA is still working on this for right now. DOTD has a special provision that puts everything on the contractor. So hopefully we'll get more clear about this as time goes on. And that should be in all contracts as of December 2022. So we'll go a little bit into sampling and testing. The three main types that you'd be dealing with will be acceptance, quality control, and verification. So acceptance testing is performed by DOTD, or our owner representative, which would be you, and that's what's controlling pay. In some cases, material may pass, or if it's not passing, to what degree is it meeting the specifications? Is it something that we would apply a pay penalty to, or remove it and replace it with passing material? Depending on the degree of departure from the specification, it could be a very expensive fix. So another reason of ensuring that everybody knows what they're doing, that all of your equipment is in working order. So some examples of acceptance testing would be slump and air on cement, concrete out in the field, and making those cylinders. In some cases, we would accept materials on a certificate of delivery, which means that the batch that's arrived on your project has been pre-approved by the department. So quality control testing is done by the contractor, and this is the way he adjusts his process to keep within the specification limits. He can make adjustments as necessary to control its quality and hopefully give us a more consistent product. If a process that he's doing is more variable, he may need to run more tests to ensure that he stays within the tolerance limits. And then verification testing is our chance to have a second look. This would be if we have questions on procedures, equipment, the quality of the sample. Did something not look right? We always have the ability to take a sample regardless if it's in the sampling manual or not. We can always stop and say, we want another sample of this. And if something's not verifying, that may warrant additional testing or investigation. And some examples of this would be emulsified asphalt, tack coats. If you're dealing with this, you'll generally be accepting the materials on a certificate of delivery at the project site, but we take one per project just to maintain a view of the material quality. And one thing that I want to note here on tack coat, we've got a nice laydown of the tack coat across the entire roadway. The distributors are set really well, so this guy's got it right. If we test this material and it's the best material that you've ever had, but the contractor is spraying it in streaks down the roadway, then all of that testing does absolutely no good. So again, passing test doesn't substitute for a failing inspection. Your inspectors are just as important in this process as anybody else. So, and again, if something's questionable, question it. Take those samples and make those calls. Another, Portland cement. Yes, we accept these on certificates of compliance, but we still take one per project just to keep everybody honest. And the verification testing is generally done by DOTD, but again, you can always take a sample if anything is in question.
Okay, it's the urchin's turn. The QC, quality control testing, is performed by the contractor to monitor, etc. What do you think? Last row.
True.
We saying true? Okay, they're saying true.
They are
True.
correct.
Very good.
So I'm going to get into a little bit of materials. I'm prefacing this. You may not have all or any of these materials on your project. This is just to kind of give an overview of the scope of the different testing that may be involved in your projects, things to think about to stay ahead and not get caught last minute needing test results. We have a lot of different tests that are performed at different labs for various reasons. So again, read your contract beforehand and get an idea of this. Like concrete and asphalt, if you're dealing with these, we require everything to come from certified plants, which DOTD certifies every 2 years. Our district labs would approve mixed designs for asphalt and concrete. And sometimes those can take some back and forth to make sure everything's correct there. Our district labs would perform soil classifications and moisture density relationships, Proctor. But then we'll take a density in the field, and that density would be, again, a part of the inspection. You got something like a pipe, and you want to make sure that the haunches of that pipe have proper density around them. If you don't have good compaction around them, you're not going to have a good pipe installation, especially with plastic pipe. So for aggregates, we'll take samples in the field. Our district labs run gradations. The sampling manual will have typical testing times on some of these, so you can get an idea of how long some of these materials would take. If there's a new source or something that's really questionable, the materials lab would test for source approval and run things like soundness and abrasion, which can take a long time, especially on things like crushed concrete. So again, plan ahead if you need to do any of these. For concrete, our district lab runs compressive strengths. Again, in the field, you'll do slump and air for acceptance. And then if DOTD is involved in some of the testing, there may be cement, fly ash. That would all go to the materials lab for verifications of any of those. Asphalt, question?
I'm sorry, a lot of times JMFs and concrete mix designs being approved prior to NTP or anything like that, or at least early on in the project. If we were the LPA's project engineer, are we responsible for approving those mix designs? DOT is our testing laboratory. Is the testing of materials and the approval of mix design?
I think that will be something discussed at a pre-con or before everything is signed over. I'm not exactly sure who would be responsible for that, but I would imagine that will be something discussed beforehand. We've had some contracts for CE&Is where the owner representative is responsible for everything, and other times they're sending it to DOTD. So I think it's kind of however it's determined prior to the start of the project. So I'm not exactly sure how to answer the question on that one, but I think that it's to be determined.
Thank you.
So district labs will run grade check for asphalt cement by doing viscosity. And then in the field, we'll take cores for density, and after the project is over, they're going to run smoothness. The asphalt plant, there's a lot of QC data, QC testing that goes on to check that process at the plant. There's verifications done by DOTD at the plant. And then the cores that are taken for acceptance are sent to the district lab or sometimes run at the plant, but it's run by DOTD. So there's a lot of moving parts in here. And then at the end, we've got the International Roughness Index, the IRI. And that's a team effort that's run by the contractor, submitted to the project engineer, and the contractor is certified for profilograph using DOTD to certify them. So this is just kind of an idea that there's quality assurance at every phase of the project. It's all important. Be aware of what materials are going to be allowed on the project, what's a proper installation. We want better consistency is going to yield a better product, and all it takes is one broken gear to stop the machine. So everything is important. It all goes together. I'm just kind of looking at here, we've got an example. Here's a contract schedule of items. We have, showing that, we got asphalt emulsion on here. We have aggregates. We have asphalt concrete. So if we look at this, you can tell from this, if you look at the sampling manual and you connect the dots, you've got plant QC. The contractor's going to have to run plant QC on his asphalt concrete. We're going to have verification samples required in that, and then there's going to have to be a field cores for acceptance for densities. And the aggregate, again, is your contractor using an approved source. Does he have a buddy down the field with stockpile that isn't on our approved list? So is that going to have to be approved prior to him doing that? So now you start getting all of this information. Okay, how do you record it? And Matt kind of went into that. I'd like it to be Headlight, I think, depending on how Headlight turns out, but for right now we're still dealing with Site Manager. It's kind of a work in progress on both ends. So Site Manager is our database of record right now. Headlight will, are they working with Headlight now, or do you know?
Oh, yeah, it's in progress. It's not
Okay.
done yet.
Okay,
So
Matt and I were talking about
A
it.
little bit of a state of flux.
Yeah.
but-
Matt said something about January potentially, and that seems
I
ambitious.
thought
but
he said to pilot, to do the materials part in Headlight on some DOTD projects. That's what I thought he said, but
from what I've seen, that will be very ambitious, but
We'll see.
I'm really hoping that it works out. So the other part of this for asphalt and concrete especially is going to be LPA. LPA is tied to Site Manager, and this is how you would handle your mix designs, your QA. The contractor is going to enter QC data into Headlight. If your people are not signed up for Site Manager, if they're not enrolled in that, and especially with LPA, talk to our automation team. We have training and stuff that they can give you on this, but just in general, from our main website, Business Construction Services, there's a DOTD system registration for Site Manager, some information that you'll fill out here. For LPA access, there's this plant designer down here, and then choose your company name, or if it's not, you can click on it and register the company there. Again, talk to our automation team. They will be able to walk you through this process, help get you set up, and give you training on Site Manager, give you training on LPA. There's a lot of good information that they can help you with there, make it a lot easier. So when you start taking these samples, we need to know some basic information. What are we testing? How much does it represent on the project? What are we testing it for? Is this an acceptance sample? Is this for pay? Is it for verification? Where is it coming from? And if it's a named product on the AML, what product is it? And all of this gets entered into this very simple form here. any of you have not worked with Site Manager before and have to, y'all are going to love this. I won't go into filling this out. I think Matt hopefully already did enough. Good.
Somewhat.
But the one thing that I will note is that when you get to the materials selection, test selection phase, we've set up to accept default tests is set up to have the most general tests necessary for those projects. So unless there's something specific that you need for a verification, accept the default tests. It's much easier to add a test than it is sometimes to delete them. So if materials are going to be sent to DOTD for testing, then for chain of custody, we're asking for everybody to use QR codes. And if you have access to our intranet site, on the Site Manager Materials Reports, there's a QR generator, but from our main Materials Lab website, sample QR code generator. Once you've created your sample in Site Manager, you'll be able to get to this page here, generating QR codes. And if something is a resample, there's even a box here to indicate that it's a resample. That can give it a little higher priority. There are options to print on 2.5 and 3.5 inch labels, or full sheet. So depending on your setup, again, our automation team can give you recommendations of the right printers to use, which ones are the best quality to use. And I don't think they're that expensive, so it seems like slapping a sticker on these samples is quite helpful. So now we've got this proper information. We know what we're testing and why we're testing it. Just as important is to make sure that we've got that sample in enough time to get your test results prior to needing it on the project, and that it's representative. We've got this QR code to help with the chain of custody. We take that sample, and we don't want to have the asphalt core rolling around in the back of a contractor's truck or somebody transporting it to a lab. The cylinders that you've taken so much time to prepare properly, and then they're thrown in the back of a truck or mishandled, and then our results aren't necessarily valid anymore. So we need to know who's going to be testing the samples, and how much time you have. And so we have DOTD sampling procedures that are referenced from the sampling manual that cover equipment, handling, labeling. Do you need in this case, for an aggregate, a shovel and a shield there. You don't want to take a sample off the top of the stockpile. It's not going to be representative, and that can delay your samples. Are you going to be taking this from a stockpile? Is it going to be from a barge, from a windrow somewhere? And all of this should be covered in the sampling procedures. So I mentioned LPA, and that's tied to Site Manager. And this is how you will manage your job mix formulas and enter data for acceptance verification. This is where the contractor's entering data for QC. And it will automatically calculate pay, generate red flags for information that you'd want to go back and look at. And this is just screenshots from LPA. We've got all of these mix designs for concrete. And so if we clicked on one of those, we would get all of the constituents here other than the aggregate. This is the cement and admixtures for a yard of concrete, cubic yard of concrete. And then on the asphalt end, there's screens that can let you enter in your gradations and all the information you're going to get when you're testing asphalt in the plant. And then for densities as well. So you know that you're going to test. How do you know how much to test? So the material sampling manual is used when you're creating your sampling plan for your specific project, and then how to complete a sample ID. What is it being tested for? Who is this being sent to? Quantities. When you're finalizing your project for the audit of testing and materials, did you take enough samples? Did you get the proper frequencies there? And this is arranged by contract item. So you've got, asphalt concrete is 502. Gives you the purpose, acceptance, QC, verification. How much do you take? That 1 per 1,000 cubic yards, 1 per project. Do you take a quart, a gallon bottle? What certificates are required with it? What documentation is required? Certificate of delivery, analysis, and compliance are 3 different types of documents. They all mean something just slightly different. And then who gets copies of those, which in general is going to be one goes for the project file and everything else can be distributed electronically. So that makes it nice now. So just going back to this was 507 asphaltic surface treatment. If we take an example of that same project that we were looking at earlier, you've got a proposed schedule of items that's got asphalt materials, CRS2P, and aggregates for that asphaltic surface treatment. So we can match the asphaltic surface treatment section for emulsified asphalt here. We got the aggregates. This is how you connect the project contract with the sampling manual. And just looking at the top line of this is just what information is in here. For those aggregates, the contractor is going to do QC for a rate of application, and then the project engineer would accept based on that rate of application as well. And then there's a gradation for the aggregates taken by the project engineer and run by the district lab. So this is the whole who is responsible. The contractor is going to run his calibration prior to the first pass of the aggregate spreader, and the PE would then accept it based off the first full pass. And for the aggregates, 1 per 1,000 cubic yards per size of aggregate, they're going to take a sample and send a sample sack to the district lab. And that's going to need a certificate of analysis that the contractor is saying, here, I've certified that this material is good, and here's the results showing it. So it's not just a trust me. There's a small quantity rule in here. If you have less than 2,000 square yards of that item on your project, you may not need to take a sample, but it's always good to take at least one sample just to keep everybody honest and do our due diligence there. The typical handling time kind of gives you an idea of how long it should take for you to get results back. It's can be more or less than that depending on what kind of a load is in the lab. So again, it just helps you plan ahead a little bit. And then the remarks column is going to give you any information that you might need that's not in the tables themselves. So we're saying that QC, the contractor's got to check sufficient to ensure that he's meeting the specifications. And if you see something that says AML, those materials need to be listed on our approved materials list.
All right, is the Scallywags' turn? What do you think? False? Are you sure? Do you really have to take material samples? Really?
This could be a trick question. You never know.
False. Good answer.
So I mentioned these certificates. Certificate of analysis is manufacturer's test results, supplier, manufacturer. This is going to represent the actual test results for the batch that you're getting on your project, not just a typical results. Certificate of compliance. This is kind of a trust me, bro. We're complying with your specifications, and here's a piece of paper that says we are. Certificate of delivery is a DOTD form, and that should have a site manager ID on it that you can tie back to the original testing that shows that DOTD performed whatever test or inspection on this material and approved this particular batch that's coming in your project. So it's not like just a bill of lading or anything. This is DOTD's approval of that material. Just looking at examples here, we have certificate of analysis, chemical results for a cement. And these are actual results, not just typical results. For certificate of compliance, some of them we have a DOTD form just to keep everything consistent for some of the cementitious materials, the fly ashes and things, but there's no testing that's been done on these for those particular batches. For something like a geotextile here, a certificate of compliance that will give typical results, but it's showing that this is going to meet DOTD specifications if you compare the documents there. And then a certificate of delivery, this is going to have up at the top, there's a site manager ID, and that indicates that 5,548 gallons of asphalt binder has been approved by DOTD. So when you get it on your job site, this piece of paper is saying it's been tested. So I mentioned the distribution. We used to have codes of who it goes to. Now pretty much everything, the project engineer is going to get a copy and keep it in his QA documentation file, and everything else can be submitted electronically. Makes things a lot easier. The approved materials list. Again, this is a listing of materials and sources that have been pre-approved, pre-qualified, and are capable of making material that meets our specification. Still need to test it according to the sampling manual, and it's not a blanket approval, but these companies are the ones that we've said you can use these on our projects. Sometimes the testing may take 3 years to complete, so we don't want to do that on a routine basis. And these are searchable on the Materials Lab website by material or by source. And in some cases for aggregates, we'll give gravities, absorptions that can help with mix designs. So you're going to use the sampling manual to create your project-specific sampling plan, and this will show for your project which materials you're going to be allowing, which ones you've selected, the item quantities that come from the bid estimates. And Site Manager we have a report that will allow you to create a very nice sample report, sampling plan. This is much improved over some of the original. This will give you bid quantities. We'll also kind of keep track of the quantities to date, how many samples were estimated as necessary and how many you've taken to date, and take some of the comments and instructions from the material sampling manual. So you can use this. You can make your own. A lot of the district labs still like to use Excel, and that's perfectly fine. So whichever tool makes it easiest for you, that's perfectly fine. So and sometimes we need to convert units. We've got Portland cement concrete, 11 inches thick here, and your item unit is in square yards. So you may need a conversion factor because now you're looking at 600 tons, 1 per 600 tons of your cement. How many samples do you need for 147,000 square yards of your pavement? There will not be a test on this, but you can convert tons of cement to square yards of concrete. Part of this is from LPA. You will be able to get information from the mix design, knowing that for your particular mix design, you may need 470 pounds of cement per cubic yard of concrete. And so with some math, you can come up with a conversion factor. And in this case, you come up with 17.7, so 18 samples of cement at 1 per every 600 tons to come up with your 147,000 square yards of concrete. So that was what you'd need for acceptance samples on your project to maintain what's required in the sampling manual. Should there be a test on that? That's the next question, right?
Oh, yeah, there is.
So during the project, you're going to keep all these certificates, all of this information in your quality assurance documents file. You're going to have your sampling plan with your updated quantities, all those certificates that come in. Especially be aware of your failing materials, because you'll have to have a disposition on those at the end of the project. And these are filed by contract item. And in addition to all of this, pretty much anything that involves quality assurance, your work zone letters, mixed designs, pavement, roadway reports, the third-party testing. If you send it to a third-party lab that's not going to be entered into Site Manager, all of that would need to go into your QA documents file. So now you've got all your testing done, you've taken all your samples, you haven't missed anything, right? Don't wait until the end of the project to find out that somebody out in the field hasn't been taking samples. They needed 1 per 600 tons, and they took 1 for the entire project.
Can you repeat your statement about the third-party testing? I want to make sure I heard you accurately.
Oh, just that if you're sending materials to a third party, not DOTD, you're sending it to a testing lab somewhere to have material run for acceptance, for DOTD's use. They don't have access necessarily to Site Manager. So you may be able to take their results and create a sample and put it into Site Manager, but if it's not, you would want to include that third-party testing in your QA documents file for that material, because it wouldn't be on the 2059, on the audit of testing materials printout from Site Manager at the end.
You gotta put it in.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
Basically, all you say.
that's all. You're just keeping track of all of the documentation there. But again, as you go through this, your summary at the end of the project, you don't want to wait until the end of the project, especially for these longer projects. Do some interim checks when specific items are complete, or every quarter. Keep in touch with your DOTD liaisons, keep in touch with the district labs, your inspectors. Be particularly aware of failing samples, and just be sure that you're taking what you need when you need it, things are working properly. Just don't wait until the end of the project to start getting all this information together, because if you come up with those surprises, you're going to have all kinds of fun. So the ATM is going to include your sampling plan with your final quantities, which the Site Manager report here would update all of these quantities as the project progresses. And your mixed designs, your certificates, all these reports. Kind of looks like the QA documents file is most of what you need for the audit of testing the materials. So if you've got a good documents file all along, then your ATM at the end becomes a lot easier. But you've got pay adjustments in here, disposition of failures, and errors and omissions. We know not everything is going to turn out right. Here was that original bid, and there was some extra quantities that appeared on your project. They ran more patching than they expected. So did that change how many samples you would need to take, and were those actually taken for those overruns? And on the first page of the Audit of Testing Materials report, we have boxes that you can check for disposition of failing tests and if there's errors and omissions. And the important thing here is to document. We've got failures on this project, so how were those handled? What did we do with those materials? In some cases, reworked a stockpile. Subsequent lab samples passed, and here are the references. If something was missed due to a miscommunication, nobody was at the plant that day, and so we didn't take samples for that particular lot. What would you tell a newspaper reporter if they asked why you had failing material on your project, or if you missed something? Give details, and never use the term, we waived the sample. So just some examples here. We've got line items that had pay penalties on them. Penalty applied to line item 58. And 805 were created as pay penalties for walks, drives that did not meet specifications. They're giving examples. They're giving details of how they're handling this. and showing that everything has been verified. Here somebody gave the detail that they had areas of failing width and they didn't meet specification. They're going to address it in the next phase of the project, and why it couldn't be met in the first phase of the project, and why they're leaving it in place, why it's not a problem. And I've mentioned it, just the inspection is just as important as any other part of the QA. It's an integral part of the entire project. Passing sample does not override a failing inspection. Are your people trained? Do they know what they're doing? Is your equipment in proper working order? Has it been calibrated? And again, have you read your contract? Last question.
Okay, sorry, I was writing down notes for myself. Barnacles. If I gotta fix this. It is okay to wait until the project is almost complete to begin gathering the information for your audit of testing and materials.
False.
What do you think? False. Good answer.
I didn't catch that.
Yeah, I know, I need to fix it. Okay.
Y'all are ready for the math test, right?
Yep, next one.
Any?
The USD's still using ProVal to analyze IRI.
I think so. I'm not 100% on that. I'd have to ask Melinda at our office, but if you want to email me, we can find that information out for you.
Okay, I'm curious, thanks.
So site manager will generate the minimum sampling requirements based on the items?
If you enter in, I think right now it starts off with no samples required for anything, and you'll go in, or one per project or something, but you can go in and put in a conversion factor, and it will take your bid quantity and convert it to the number of samples. So you'll have to build it, but that was easier. I think originally everything was on, and you'd have to go in and start turning things off, and it was a nightmare. So they changed it to where everything is defaulted to zero, and you go in and enter in for the materials that you're going to use.
Okay, but it still would flag if this item requires testing.
That's the idea.
Okay.
And they did a lot of work to get that sampling plan to give us more information. And it seems like just having the bid quantity installed to date, the instructions from the sampling manual, the frequencies and all in there, seems like it's a lot more information for you out there than, hopefully the one in Headlight is going to be even better.
This may be a little bit off topic, but this is kind of a pebble in my shoe. I do program management for a parish, and I can't tell you how many times I'm reviewing specifications that are, adhere to the purple book, but the consultant adds in a spec for 72202 field lab equipped, thinking that that's an actual field office. Do y'all still use field lab? I mean, is that the material lab that you're referencing, or do y'all are sending everything to the actual district labs?
Well, I think the field laboratory, the 722, is just a space out at the project site for the PE to do whatever paperwork, or the inspector to do paperwork. I think it's supposed to have internet access and electricity, air conditioning, that kind of a thing.
It goes to, it states something about aggregate and testing. I mean, it's a testing lab.
Okay.
I don't know if that's, if that's something that y'all, I mean, again, this is for parishes, so they're not DOTD,
Right.
right? But,
I'd have to look
I guess.
into the specifics of 722. But I mean, our district laboratories are, they're one entity. I don't think that the field laboratories, I don't think that's what they're referring to by 722, not the district labs or the materials lab. I think they're actually referring to a setup on the job site. But again, I'd have to read that specification and look at it. I'm not
Okay.
familiar
I
with the
figured
wording
with
in
it
it.
being testing and all of that stuff, you would have some insight.
There may be stuff out there about doing like slump and air, they may have equipment out there to hold that, the instruments and stuff.